Hey, y'all, it's Barrett from the All About Nothing podcast. Winter's coming, but that doesn't mean you've got to slow down.
Nope, because Everplay Sports and Social has their winter leagues open for registration right now.
That's right. Starting Sundays, you can get in on softball at T.S. Martin Park.
Mondays are packed. You've got pickleball at the Casey Pickleball Complex, softball again at T.S. Martin Park, indoor volleyball at the Tri-City Leisure Center, and turf soccer at the Recreation Athletics.
Tuesdays, that's when it really heats up. You can play Super Rec kickball at M Avenue Park, sand volleyball at Pollywogs, indoor volleyball at Tri-City Leisure Center, and bowling at Lucky Strike in Casey.
Wednesdays are loaded too. Soccer at B Avenue Park and Bray Park Field, hardball softball at T.S. Martin Park, dodgeball at Drew Wellness Center, and of course, kickball at M Avenue Park.
And wrapping up the week on Thursdays, you've got even more kickball at M Avenue Park and B Avenue Park.
So whether you're into kicking, spiking, bowling, or just hanging out, there's something for everyone.
Almost forgot. Special one-night events.
Monday, November 10th, mix and match turf soccer at Recreation.
Pick up basketball Monday, November 17th at Drew Wellness Center.
And mix and match indoor volleyball at Tri-City Leisure Center, Tuesday, November 18th.
Registration for Everplay's Winter Leagues is open now, but you have to sign up before November 16th.
Do not wait. Teams fill up fast.
Go to everplaysocial.com. That's everplaysocial.com to join a league, meet new people, and make this winter one to remember.
So, dodgeball or bowling?
I'm thinking both. Got to balance the cardio and the nachos. Everplay Sports and Social. Play more, hang out more, live more.
This is Bill Kimler, co-host of the Black, White, and Blue in the South podcast. This Halloween, stand out from the crowd with ZJZDesigns.com. Their brand new limited edition spooky prints are here to haunt your wardrobe in the best way possible. With 5 new chilling designs, you'll be ready for trick-or-treating, haunted houses, and everything this spooky season has to offer. Whether you're getting festive for the holidays or just looking for unique, high-quality designs to up your style game, ZJZDesigns.com has you covered. Shop now at ZJZDesigns.com and discover the t-shirts that'll make you stand out in any season. Don't get caught without the coolest Halloween t-shirt. Grab yours before they disappear. ZJZDesigns.com.
The All About Nothing podcast may have language and content
that isn't appropriate for some. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, Nothingers, to the All About Nothing podcast. This is episode number 278. I'm Barrett Gruber, joined by Mr. Zach King. Welcome, Zach.
Welcome, Barrett.
How was your week?
Busy.
Yeah. You guys are in fourth quarter right now. It's all prepare and sign up, right?
Yeah. So fourth quarter isn't really a thing anymore for me, thank God. But yeah, it is open enrollment time. So which is beholden in fourth quarter. But yeah. 1,000 people. I've talked to about 1,000 people in 4 weeks.
Oh yeah.
That's directly.
Just know when I go and caucus and I walk and knock at doors and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's usually about 1,000 people in a day. So
it takes a toll on your voice.
It takes a toll on your soul is what it does. Please subscribe and share the show. That's how we get new listeners. Also, please consider supporting the show financially by visiting theallaboutnothing.com and becoming an official member and proudly calling yourself a true nothinger. We'll have more details on that at the end of the show. If you can't do that, please give us a 5-star review, a like, and follow us across all social media. You can do that by going to theallaboutnothing.com. SoulHAUS Sessions with Priest Jacobs, session number 3, comes up October 22nd. At the Koger Center for the Arts. Doors open at 5 o'clock, featuring guests from Columbia's Colacon. This is it's an anniversary type panel that is going to be discussing hip hop, comic, and artists from around the Columbia Southeast area. So make sure you come for that. Also, there's going to be artwork displayed by Dan Lish. I have to make a correction because I kept saying that Dan Lish was going to be in town from the UK. I was wrong. So if you're looking for a refund, hoping that you were going to see Dan Lish and now you're not,
no,
you already bought the tickets.
People probably booked plane tickets to come see him, and it's all because you fed false information. Barrett will personally pay you back for your plane ticket.
Yeah, at a discounted rate though. Tickets available through Eventbrite. You can check the show notes or follow Preach at Preach Jacobs. on the Instagram. So, all right, today, our show, we're talking politics, history, and a little bit of deja vu. Our guest, Dennis A. Brennan, is an attorney, historian, and author who connects the dots between the past and the present. His new book, The Political Witch Hunts of Aaron Burr and Donald Trump, dives deep into how power, justice, and spin repeat themselves, even with just new headlines, just with new headlines. So, welcome, Dennis. How are you?
I am doing great. Thanks a lot for having me on.
We discussed a little earlier, you're in Chicago, and of course, the Cubs got knocked out last night. So, as a White Sox fan, do you throw a party, or you just kind of go, same as us?
Yeah, I think at this point, the way the White Sox play, I don't take any great joy in the Cubs losing anymore. That used to be the way I was, but I've grown as a person, and now it's since my season ended in spring training, I don't want them to win, but I don't care if they win or lose, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel you, because as a Braves fan, what I saw in the opening of the season was just sort of it was a telltale of exactly what was going to happen. So, tell us about yourself. Where you grew up, how all of this came to be.
Okay, I grew up just outside of Chicago in a little village called Marionette Park, South Side.
Oh, yeah.
That's probably the White Sox influence. It was just a closer park. So I think when my father brought us to the baseball game, it was the Sox game. Was educated very close down the street for K through 8, went to a high school that was only about a mile away, and my college, St. Xavier, was probably 3 miles away. So during that time, I did work while I was in college. So I actually worked like 10 years for a food store, which is no longer in business, as many things aren't. Family was, we had five of us in, a 3-bedroom home. So it wasn't roomy, to say the least. Everybody has huge homes now. Parents were Democrats. I think we were all Democrats at one point there. I slowly switched. Really the Reagan time. I have a book back there on Reagan.
Yeah.
So I became more conservative as time has gone on. When I went to law school, it was called the John Marshall Law School. That's been changed to the University of Illinois Chicago Law School due to the idea that John Marshall had slaves. So they changed the name a few years ago, which is silly, but that's what they did. And they merged with the University of Illinois to do that. To me, it makes no difference. I guess I do tell people I went to the University of Illinois at Chicago Law School because that's what it's known as now. Over the years, I've been an attorney for 35 years, practiced all kinds of law, including real estate, lobbying. I've owned a couple businesses. I owned a newspaper, was a reporter and an editor for it. I had a title insurance company, co-owned an energy company, but overall, still always practiced law at some point. Most of it transactional, real estate, contracts, that sort of thing. But I was also in the courtroom at times. And out from that, that's about it. I've got one son, one granddaughter now, 2 months old. That's kind of the short story.
Congratulations on being a grandfather. That's exciting. I think I kind of look forward to the idea of being a grandparent, but at the same time, I don't want to be the person that my kids count on to have to take care of their kids, because I don't know. I don't know what it is. I just don't want that responsibility right now. The kids are getting older. We'll get them out the door, let them take care of themselves, pin a $20 bill to them and say, don't get picked up by somebody you shouldn't. Listen, sorry. I have weird impressions of where my kids should be.
My kids are currently with their grandparents, so I'm very happy that they're around.
Yeah. So, Dennis, you talk about also being a historian, or at least in your About Me, it talks about being a historian. So, what was it specifically about did you see ties between how Donald Trump and Aaron Burr are being recognized by the media? What was it specifically that drew you to writing this book?
A friend of mine wrote a book about Aaron Burr, and he brought it to the office, and he said, "Here's a copy." And, I read it, and he came back a few weeks later and said, "What do you think?" And I should say he's a Democrat political consultant, bright guy,
Okay.
runs races all over the country, congressional races, state races. So I read it and I thought, well, yeah, it's a good book. And I told him when he asked, yeah, good book. A lot of things I didn't know about Aaron Burr. But I said, I think you missed the story. There's always a but, right? And when you hear, you probably just want to hear a great book and probably didn't want to hear the rest. I said that what I see happening to Burr is the same thing that was happening to Trump. And this is before Trump won this second election. He looked at me like, Democrats look at Republicans and vice versa. Like, what? What are you, nuts? No, there's no connection. And, we talked about it a little bit. He didn't see the connection. And he said, he wouldn't. I said, well, if you're not going to write about that, then I'm going to do it. So I decided I'd write the book. So in some ways, he's the guy that got me started doing it. And I started looking into Aaron Burr even more, reading other books on him, researching his life. Trump was easier, obviously, because he's out there. And out there, I mean in the public. I don't mean out there like.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Oh, we'll pull that trigger. That's for us. He feels out there, but
right, depends how you look at it.
But obviously, Hamilton, the Broadway show, musical, very, very popular. But even from what I learned in school back in the 80s, like what they tell about Aaron Burr and Hamilton's relationship in the Broadway musical isn't historically accurate. The fact that Hamilton was they wanted you to believe that Hamilton was this abolitionist. I mean, he wasn't. It wasn't historically correct. But what are some of the things that we have misconceptions of about Aaron Burr that the story doesn't tell accurately?
Yeah, I think, the one thing everybody remembers probably from school is Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton having a duel and Alexander Hamilton dying as a result of that. And that's pretty much where our knowledge tends to end. I don't know if that's an indictment of us as students or or the education system, perhaps. But most of us don't, even though they have discussed all the other parts of Burr at some point, we just don't remember, the tie when he and Jefferson ran for president and vice president. Burr and Jefferson tied. There's, at that time, the election then would go to the Congress, even though they were running on the same ticket. So that went on and on. It was kind of reminiscent of, Kevin McCarthy's election for speaker a few years ago, where it had several votes to get there. There was some of the detractors of Burr, were arguing that he wasn't doing enough to make sure it was Jefferson. He just went home, and which kind of understandable in the times that they were living in. He just said, "Okay, we'll see what happens." He didn't make any deals though, and although he was taking a lot of heat for that, for not standing up and saying, "No, he was president, I'm vice president, just vote it that way." I don't know if that'd make a difference even then. In politics, it's hard to convince anybody of anything. And I don't think it was much different then from everything I've seen. So, he already started out kind of on the wrong foot with some of Jefferson's people. The bigger story, I think, is what was known as the Spanish conspiracy. It's also been named the Burr conspiracy, where he was accused of raising an army to actually go to war with Spain to take over parts of what's now the western part of the United States and Mexico, and actually start his own country and insert himself that I think is where he got a bad rap. I mean, he might have done that, but there was no evidence he really did that, or not enough evidence.
I was going to say,
now that sounds Trumpy to do that.
I had never even heard that before. I had never heard of Aaron Burr trying to raise a militia or an army to try and take over the western section of the continent.
Yeah, and that's what he was charged. He was charged with treason. Now everybody says it's treason, right? Democrats, Republicans, everybody's treasonous. It's like, no. I mean, no.
It's a big word.
Yeah, the definition of treason in our minds, I think, as citizens is way off base. It's like, you're not treasonous just because you did something I don't like. So Burr, had he actually taken up, arms against another country, yeah, I think he might have been accused of treason. It was interfering with the United States. Ultimately, he had 2 trials, for treason. He was successful in both, although in the end, his name was ruined. Where, you go the other way with Trump, he had a lot of cases. He had the advantage of television, social media. He had some, support, I think, to, when he comes out and says, I'm not guilty of any of this stuff, it was easier maybe to counteract it. Burr, on the other hand, tried, putting his faith in the legal system. And although I've been an attorney for a long time, I wouldn't want to put my faith in, the jury or in the court if I was accused of something. I don't know if that's a different time or whatever, but he had a lot of faith in it.
No, I'll admit one of the things. So I have several friends that are attorneys here in Columbia. They're criminal attorneys, and one of the things that they fight every single case before a jury is that if they have someone who has committed a crime, they are currently in prison, they are not out on bail, they have to walk in that orange jumpsuit. That orange jumpsuit almost immediately gives the impression of guilt. Okay. And the first thing they argue every single time is, can we just get him in a suit? Can we take away that automatic perspective of prison garb, you're in jail. Clearly, it sets the tone right off. What was some of the, like, looking back on how Aaron Burr was recognized by, because back in Aaron Burr's, back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, a lot of what seemed to be published in the newspapers around were things that were written almost as editorials by themselves. Like Hamilton would write his own editorials. Franklin, Jefferson, they would all write letters to the newspapers, and that was basically the news.
Right. Yeah, and it's it was part of what they called the party press era, and the bias was built in because these pamphlets or newspapers, whatever you want to call them, I think they mostly called them pamphlets at the time, but we refer to them as newspapers. Yes, it was totally biased. The party paid for the pamphlet to go out one way or the other. And, Hamilton started the New York Post, still around, but everybody had something to say, and they were able to say it in their own pamphlet or something an ally owned. So it made it difficult for Burr to get his story out. By the time, he was being charged with treason, basically everybody thought he was guilty. Nobody knew really, what does treason even mean? We didn't have the same education levels at the time. Now, the good thing for him, maybe, when you refer to the jury system or even the court system and it's, in and of itself, you don't have that instant news, right? Because now you're on social media. It's very difficult, I think, to get a fair trial. I don't care where they move your trial to. If you commit a crime there and they move you here, I'm probably going to have heard of it just because of social media. If it's that big a deal. So
I think the 24-hour news cycle is it's painful, because one of the things that I take away from it is that something very important happens, and then the next day something, in my opinion, isn't very important, but it overrides whatever happened. Take Tennessee. Literally just 4 days ago, we had one of the most massive explosions of an artillery plant in Tennessee explodes, literally kills almost every single person working in the plant. I mean, there's the potential. There may have been 20 people that were killed in this thing. The news has already moved on. The investigation, like even the investigators have said, look, at this point, there's nothing left. We're basically going to go in there and do a cleanup. It's disturbing that our news cycle moves so quickly that we can't even, in order to find out what happened, we'll probably have to look back at it 3 or 4 months from now just to get an accurate idea of what went wrong. So,
that judge's house that burned down, I haven't heard anything else from that.
Yeah. So in South Carolina, we had a federal district court judge, her house burned to the ground. This was the woman that blocked the Trump administration's attempts at trying to pull voter record data, and which ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, is really a dumb request, because for $80 I can get the entire state's voting record for the last 25 years on a DVD. The fact that the Trump administration had to go all the way to the Supreme Court to get this is more reflective of, are we just trying to create something that it looks like the Democrats are trying to stop, and then Trump is continuing to go for it? Like it feels like it is news that is manufactured in order to create some other narrative, when all they would have had to do, somebody could have asked me, they gave me $80, I'd have gone ahead and buy it for them and put it on a DVD and send it to them. Like that's essentially, like, it doesn't make it
Trump,
difference.
I'll get that info for you.
Yeah.
You make a good point on manufacturing news. I think 2 points there, right? When CNN first started, that everybody for, immediate news, I think nationally, that's where you went. All the other media didn't matter. It was CNN, turn it on. Even probably with the towers being hit in New York, I think most people were probably watching CNN that day, and probably all day. So wherever you went, now you're right. It's like that. It becomes, that's the news. Then the next day, okay, what's our news? And I think the news media across the board seems to want to set up, okay, what's the story going to be? And they're almost setting up the narrative before they get the actual news. And then there's nothing there, or it becomes, well, okay, next day we'll move to something else. And it kind of does a big disservice to those of us watching it. And unfortunately, I think even when you switch, everybody says, well, you're getting your news in the wrong place, and that's the new way of talking to people. But you switch around, they're all covering. They do it locally, too. We have, the local stations, and there's really 5. And I always wonder, like, how did they all know that was the same story to cover? Like, nobody thought, this isn't important. I don't really care about this. I'm going to cover something else. It's quick, and then you forget that was there. And whether it's a tragedy or not, it's almost like there is no story after we give you the basics. There's somehow this bomb factory went off. I was more interested in, like, wait a minute, we have bomb factories? I never answered the question. Like, I didn't know we had those there.
Sir, we're about to have a Qatari Air Force base in Idaho. Like, weird. But if so, just purely out of curiosity, if Aaron Burr and Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson existed now, the things that Aaron Burr was accused of, or was, his name was dragged through the mud, do you think it would have had as much of an impact now as it did then if the news cycle moved as quickly? I don't.
Yeah,
I just don't. Because
it's a good question. Although, I don't know, because you look at you compare it to like Trump, who's probably been the major news story for 10, 11 years now.
10 years.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's, and it'll be interesting to see, does that continue even when he's gone? I suppose when he's dead, no, but I mean, gone out of office. And it seems like every day there's something related to Trump. I don't know. Maybe that's part of it's being president, obviously, but part of it is him, because even prior to being elected the second time, he was, in the news constantly. Aaron Burr seems to be like a person that was just going to go straight with the court system, which would probably bury your story, until you're back in court. Even the Diddy stuff, you heard about the charges right away. Then you hear it next time he's in court. Then it's almost like at the end, okay, we've got a verdict. It's like, wait a minute. I was following that kind of, but you had to actually find it somewhere, I think. And maybe those were more entertainment news shows. I didn't see much of it, and they didn't seem to care once you had the charges out there. Now, I think in Diddy's case, most people probably had a negative view once they heard the charges. And it's, you're almost ruined when the charges come out. So, how do you fight that?
Yeah. Well, and as an example, so here in South Carolina, the district that I live in for House Representative was occupied by a man named R.J. May. And he ran a campaign in 2020 that basically was completely aligned with Donald Trump. And it was, we have to do everything we can to make America great. So we need Donald Trump in there for another term. The only other policies that he sort of stood on, and he was one of the co-founders of the South Carolina Freedom Caucus, was protecting children from, books that don't exist in elementary schools. And basically it was a made up narrative to try and make parents fear that their children were being exposed to things, drag queen story hours and things like this, that from knowing several drag queens don't impact anyone's lives in any way, shape, or form out, as far in a negative way. They're not reading like weird books or anything like that. And none of the ones that I know host any drag queen story hours, but he had his whole platform was on protecting children. Fast forward 3 years later, you find out that the federal government, the FBI and the HSI are investigating him for child sexual sexual abuse material, because he was alleged to have been the recipient and distributor of a lot of material. And but he had this persona. He would stand in front of libraries and he'd stand in front of schools that wouldn't fire librarians because they were not making a list of these books that were supposedly on the shelves that ultimately your student didn't have access to because they're 4 and they're in a K3 or K4 program. And so it was always trying, and same as what we were just discussing, it was creating news where there wasn't any that existed. And he was raising his platform through misinformation, where he would have the Moms for Liberty stand out in front of a school and threaten lawsuit to sue anyway. So last week he pled guilty to these charges. Wow. Because the evidence was just enormous. He was never going to have, and there was nobody that was willing to represent him. So he was going to represent himself, not as a lawyer, but as a campaign manager. Essentially, he owns a campaign management business.
He did,
or consulting, yeah. and ultimately, he pled guilty. The suspicion is, and what I've been told is that he has told many people that he's counting on a pardon from Donald Trump, because he was a big Donald Trump supporter.
I don't think you're getting a pardon for that one. I mean, I don't know that story, which kind of goes back to the issue of the news. If I did read about it, it must have come in and out of my head, because that isn't one I know of. But I always get a kick out of people that think they're going to get a pardon for some of these terrible crimes, like child pornography or if he did anything even worse, that you're probably not getting a pardon from the president. I don't see that happening for you just because you were a big supporter.
Ghislaine Maxwell might.
Oh, Ghislaine Maxwell?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? Ghislaine Maxwell, I watched a little bit of that. And you know what's funny is we say all these women are victims except Ghislaine. And it's like, well, why is she a victim? How do we know she's not? Maybe that's part of her. I mean, I always thought she made two big mistakes. One, she had citizenship, I think, in maybe it was France, but it was a country that wouldn't have extradited her. And she could have taken off. Instead, she's sitting here. Like, are you nuts? Why did you think she wasn't going to be prosecuted? You know you're being investigated generally. I mean, people, that they're investigating you. It's not hard to figure that out. And gotta say, I don't think I'd be staying knowing I could have 20 years in prison. That's silly. So she must have really thought she hadn't done anything, which I don't know if that goes to her own psyche or, maybe she hadn't done anything.
Right.
Well, and not to give her any credit, but because obviously I think everyone is probably on the same page when it comes to the likelihood of what Jeffrey Epstein did. I don't think I know anyone that would deny that there's insurmountable evidence to show that Jeffrey Epstein definitely was participating in this. He was clearly arranging it. And if Ghislaine Maxwell was the person that was doing the recruiting, knowing that what these women were going to be, what was going to happen to these women, I think that if she stuck around, I think she probably thought that I'm speculating. It's terrible to speculate, but I think that she thought the potential is that she would, with Donald Trump in office and Jeffrey Epstein behind bars, that the justice system probably wasn't going to come. But it took like Merrick Garland. It takes too long. Justice moves a little slow. It moves too slow.
The part of that, I think, is when you're looking at the federal government, it always moves too slowly. But their case is usually so locked down on you. The rate of conviction, I think it was like 92% last I saw.
Yeah.
I've told people, there's two things. The FBI comes to your door. Do not talk to them. Tell them that you got to talk to my attorney. Don't assume that they're there to find out what you're putting in your garden. They're not. You're going to be charged with lying to the FBI because somewhere you're going to say something that's a lie that in your head, maybe you don't even know it's a lie. And then, secondly, if you're indicted, take the advice of the attorney who's going to tell you, we have to plead this out. And if Ghislaine, if she had information on these guys, I guess it's guys, right, that were going to Epstein Island, why not turn that? She never turned in any evidence or testified. And I mean, I don't understand that part if she had enough evidence. So why not?
There's a lot of gaps. And ultimately, I feel like her trial went quickly and under the radar. It felt like everything that happened with her was super quick. I don't believe she pled guilty for a lesser sentence. I think for the most part it was wham bam, thank you ma'am, and it was over. But it was I guess if we're tiptoeing into that subject, the whole Epstein Trump situation, any relationship between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, I think has been publicly available for at least 10 or 15 years now. We've known that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were friends. I think to deny that is probably silly because you have photographic evidence, you have letters between the two of them, you have the fact that he's on his flight logs and vice versa. Like, these were two guys that were friends. They ran around in the same parties. And I'll just say, I don't know what evidence is in the jury test or the grand jury testimony from witnesses and victims and things like that. We don't know what that is unless it gets released.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't, even though I am not a Donald Trump fan, I definitely think that in this situation, I think it's good to have the evidence be available and potentially at least reviewed by some sort of judiciary committee. But I think all the hubbub around it isn't necessary until we actually know what it is. I have been called in check many, many times because sometimes my opinions about Donald Trump are so just vicious, and I recognize that, and I try and hold back on it a little bit from time to time. But when it comes to something as serious as this, the likelihood is that I don't want to be wrong about it. I have my opinions, but my opinions are that I don't like Donald Trump just because of who he has portrayed himself to be over the last 60 or 70 years or 60, 70. He's not that old. I do try and claim that he's like 100, but he's not. But that he is someone that has taken advantage of the system where those advantages could be taken of. And I've met him once. And in that meeting, he was a very pleasant individual. He was very kind. He made sure everybody had a seat. He made sure everybody was taken care of. And it was just to do a dopey radio interview about some stupid show he was working on with NBC called Celebrity Apprentice, where he was going to have Meatloaf and Gary Busey go at it. Two extremely low IQ individuals. But it was good, it was for entertainment purposes. But like it was silly to have for me, it was just kind of silly to have Donald Trump, who was this huge, real estate mogul. I didn't know a whole lot about back in like the late 90s. I just knew that he had some books and that he was going to have this TV show and all this other stuff. But Donald Trump, for me, has always, since he became political, has felt vicious. He has always felt it's always felt like Donald Trump is constantly looking to try and one up everyone else, even when it wasn't necessary. So the correlation between Aaron Burr and it, in reading the book, I guess what I took away was, one of the things that I took away is that Donald Trump put himself in this position, and it never felt like it was for everyone. And I say that as a Democrat or as a liberal or a progressive, but it always felt like Donald Trump was always looking out for him and his bank account. But it never came across to me like he was really looking for the benefit of the country. But again, my bias is attached to that. So when you look at Donald Trump and Aaron Burr, the correlations that you made, I agreed with some of them for sure, because I feel like they were both victims of the opposition, and the opposition always seemed to have that grasp on the media. So just maybe talk a little bit about the comparisons that you make.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a big one with the media. That certainly, I think it was a surprise to Trump. We really don't know if it was a surprise to Aaron Burr, because I think Trump, as you describe him, he's been a personality, maybe not 60 years, but certainly 40 years where he's been out there in New York, especially. He's been involved in, politics to an extent of, appearing with people like, President Clinton, fundraising, and every politician wants those guys that are going to, provide donations. And he used it, I think, also for
right. Yeah, of course.
To build his business, donating. Certainly, you're going to get the attention of those in power. So I think it was a big shock to him when he became president, and all of a sudden, those same people, maybe that he thought were friends, regardless of party, were against him. I think also he had been treated so kindly or almost deferentially, by the media. And I touch upon some of that in the book. But it's not only those television shows he would go on and be treated like he was a celebrity, but a friend also. And they would speak of him like that, like, "Oh, well, Donald's a friend. I know Donald." It's like, you really don't, but you think you know this person. And all of a sudden, then they think they know him when he is elected. That he's a terrible person than what they knew him as, which is kind of a disconnect for all of us that have watched it. I think, the media, it's so divided now. And maybe, to the point in the book, it was divided then too through the party press. It's, there's a time in between maybe where you had more of an unbiased, Walter Cronkite or whoever you want to pick out, that they're telling it down the, straight down the line. But, dealing with that media influence, it made Trump probably move even more to his allies, right? So when we look at him, it's as if, well, if I'm being attacked, I don't even want to deal with these people. I want to call them names, or I want to ignore them. And I think I've always had this issue here with our local media in campaigns I was involved in. You see them do certain things and you're like, wait a minute, you've already decided that's who you're with well before you're endorsing anybody, just by how you're doing your stories. And I think I never realized that was a national thing really until Trump came along. And you see it, whether it's pro-Trump or anti-Trump, there doesn't seem to be a look at him straight down the middle, and the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever. And it kind of colors our own opinion of him, whether you think he's not doing the right things for the country and only for himself, or you think, wow, on the other edge, he's the greatest president since, Lincoln or whoever. And maybe both.
There's no in between.
Yeah, there's no in between, because it goes, I think, to the media and what we're fed constantly. We tend to watch whatever network we like. Even if you do switch around, you're like, okay, they're crazy, and you switch back to where you were, your safe place, as they say.
and I'll speak to that. Like, when I worked in radio and television when I lived in Atlanta, I worked with some of the reporters that are on Fox News. I worked with some of the reporters that are on CNN. I can't think of any from MSNBC. MSNBC wasn't a thing, I don't think, when I was working in TV and radio. But John Roberts, who is an anchor on Fox News, outstanding reporter, because he was on CNN. Outstanding reporter. I knew that if John Roberts was saying something, if he had written a news piece and he was reading it, or he was on the scene of something, I knew what I was getting was accurate. When he got promoted to being the morning anchor on CNN, I was very excited for him. I didn't like, after he became promoted, the fact that it felt more like he was editorializing rather than just reporting. But for the most part, he tended to stay right in just the reporter. He went to Fox News. He was the White House correspondent for years, and then he got promoted to a seat. When he was the White House correspondent, it felt very balanced on Fox News, because I would watch specifically for him. But then he got the anchor seat, and then it became editorial. It was almost all opinionated. And I think that's one of the problems is a problem, in my opinion, with how Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, if you're sitting behind that anchor's desk, you have to come out there with an opinion. You have to create an opinion based on what's going on the news, and it goes to the right or it goes to the left. But the reporters, the actual people doing the work, I think between CNN and Fox News and MSNBC, I think those reporters genuinely still do a very good job about gathering the information and reporting it. That part doesn't feel slanted. Not all, sometimes it does, but not all the time. It feels like at least Fox News reporters, CNN reporters, the ones on the streets, the ones gathering the information, they still do a relatively good job. For the most part. I think that is genuinely, they're trying to report the news without the bias.
Well, your problem is when Jesse Waters says you need to exterminate the homeless people.
Well, no, unfortunately, that was
kind of editorial. Yeah,
that was disagreeable for sure.
Watching all the other co-hosts' faces, kind of go, okay,
yeah.
I think it was Brian Kilmeade that said that.
Yeah, well, it was Brian Kilmeade.
Oh, was it Brian Kilmeade? It seemed like a Jesse Waters thing to say.
I think Brian Kilmeade, you just kind of stick on the couch just to have somebody, this is your dopey friend that drinks too much. That's what Brian Kilmeade is to me.
But I think the problem is you're touching upon the opinion, the difference, and maybe it's the networks that have skewed that whole look, right? When you turn on Rachel Maddow or Sean Hannity or I'm not sure who's the big voice on CNN. Is there one anymore? But when you
Jake Tapper, maybe.
Jake Tapper, okay. And when you turn them on, you probably should be expecting opinion. That's the show they're doing. Maybe maybe it should be clearer when they do that, because even I spoke about news. It's not just the television. You're looking at the media with the print media. And years ago, I was involved in a school board race where I had donated a good sum of money, and you have to report it to the state on a certain time, and the treasurer reported it a day late. So the state then wants to come after me. It's like, well, I donated the money. There was a newspaper reporter / columnist. He wrote a column it's a local paper. It was the big local paper, though, in the area. So I'd say, it's not the Tribune, but, it's bigger than the penny saver being dropped off with all the ads at your house. So he wrote a column, and I was in Las Vegas for something, and one of my brothers called me saying, dude, they're saying you're going to be indicted by the federal government. I'm like, what? I go, I have to look up this thing. Like, and it's sure enough, it's saying that, I could face federal indictment for this donation. I'm like, now it's ruining my trip to Vegas, by the way, because I know it's not a crime. I know it's not a federal crime. It's a school board election, for crying out loud. And this guy, we sued him, but the problem with suing people, for, libel, ever since New York Times versus Sullivan, which when I studied journalism, I thought, yeah, that makes sense. You can't be held, responsible for a mistake, really. But this guy purposely did that. And his defense wasn't, oh, no, he could be tried for a crime. His defense was, it's my opinion. Okay, where in that column does it say it's an opinion? Now, because, Illinois is, jointly working closely with the media, we lost the case. And I said, screw that, we're appealing. I told the guy who was doing it, we're appealing. And against some advice from my brother, who's also an attorney, who said, stop it, don't quit the fight. I'm like, no, I'm right on this. Appellate court said the same thing. And years later, I ran into a guy who does defense work for the media, and we were on another case. And I introduced myself. I said, I'm Dennis Brennan. He's like, you're the famous Dennis Brennan? And I thought, famous? How? And he said, the case, Brennan versus Cadner. I'm like, why is that good? I lost it. It was, yes, but you made great case law for me. He goes, I use that case all the time. He goes, that was never the law. I said, I know it wasn't the law, but it became the law. And it basically said, the opinion doesn't count, even though we never labeled it opinion. And I've always thought, if you're going to lay it out like you're doing a news story, you shouldn't have your opinion in there. You should stick, in journalism, it's the 5 W's, the 1 H. That's what should be the basis of your story. Unfortunately, a lot of times, both sides, you see this reporting in the newspapers even, and you can tell they'll put their own opinion. It's like, well, I don't care about that. You could leave that on the editorial page that people never really want to read. Or if you want to write an opinion column, label it an opinion column. I'm okay with that too. You can roast any of us for that. So, that was a little, I know that's on a tangent, but it's my own personal story.
No, but you're right.
That's the big problem too, is editorialized, and these opinions come out that are prefaced as if they're the news itself and never make that distinction. I think you're absolutely right on that.
Yeah,
let me ask you. Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. Let me ask you, because I want to get back to your book. Is this your first book that you've written? This isn't your first book, is it?
It is. This is the first book. I've actually written the second one, but I haven't done anything with it yet. I have to get it edited and so forth. But this is the first book. And like I said, it really came from my friend writing a book. I've thought over the years, I should write a book. You always hear people say they should write a book. And really, I think he just gave me kind of the ignition to do it. Like, hey, this is something you could write about. Because I've been passionate about politics, political history. I thought, this might be something I could do. So,
when I know that the Aaron Burr, I guess I want to call it historical drama, soap opera. What it felt like, just from the retelling of, Hamilton from Lin-Manuel Miranda and things like that, that Aaron Burr was a guy that just sort of sat on the side and waited to see which direction things were going to go before he jumped in.
Yeah.
But based on everything I've read, he wasn't really that guy. That really wasn't. He did seem to have a history of trying to find compromise over the fighting. But I guess I never took away the idea that he was trying to figure out which way the direction the wind was going to blow before he settled on something. It didn't feel like that just based on the readings. So the Hamilton musical gave was sort of this impression of a waney, waxy sort of just, whatever. But that wasn't really him, was it?
No, I think you're right. I think what's mistaken is this idea of carefully thinking about issues and perhaps not always being, today I'd say conservative, liberal, or progressive, even however you want to put it, that if we don't stay in line 100% of whatever lane we're in, then we're wishy-washy, right? He couldn't be defined, I think, early in his career, and people had the impression that, hey, we don't know what party this guy's even with. And, that worked out for him eventually, but I think he also got a bad rap, at least like in the musical, and maybe some historical accounts where people, take that as today's wishy-washy guy. You can't. Now we want our politicians to be 100% pure.
I was going to say, Aaron Burr strikes me as a moderate centrist. Like that's who I, just even in your book and even just the readings that I've done historically on formation of the government and the United States and things like that. Aaron Burr always came across as a centrist. How is this going to benefit everyone in mass? How is it going to create problems? That's how it always came across. And while sure, Hamilton and Washington and Jefferson and Madison, they were all, even though we look at them as being our founding fathers or the fathers of this country, their flaws made their way into the government. Whether it was slavery or it was Madison's almost extreme need for power and attention, things like that. I just it always came across as silly to me how we turned these people into heroes, even though Jefferson, at his own admission, never wanted anyone to recognize him as a hero. He never, Washington the same. Neither one of them had any interest in people, history looking at them as these great men. John Adams was one of potentially could have been one of the better presidents in that group, except he was flawed in the fact that he was just always irritated at everyone. He was the smartest person in the room, and he made sure he let everyone know all the time. I don't know. It is absolutely a fascinating book. How has the social media changed the nature of politics, warfare, like compared to Burr versus the now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the instantaneous attacks that you see on social media now, and you also seem to have many more individuals besides the Elon Musk idea was we are the news now. It has kind of become that where people I had never heard of have become these social media stars on each side, and they will put out information sometimes that isn't always accurate. There's no journalistic standard for them either. So if we are the news, we're not doing a good job, or we're using it to attack each other. And we'll see whether it's the Democrats or Republicans, they're putting it out and they're getting it out to all their followers, or, based on algorithms, you might see it even if you don't like that fella. And that's a problem because now you have to respond all so quickly. It was bad enough when you just relied on literature being sent to your house and the mailbox would be full of all that. That seems to be going away as far as people caring about it. And it's more now, what's on my social media feed? I actually used to look at all the literature. I was very interested in what they were saying. And from a young age on, now it's like, well, I hardly look at any of that stuff that's sent to the house. It's like, I don't know if that's just the aging process or the fact I'm getting it instantaneously on social media.
Well, and as you probably know, I helped run a state reps campaign last year. And one of the things that we had to recognize in some of the mailers that we sent out and the documents we sent out was that you have about 15 seconds for someone to look at that thing and go, yeah. And then it gets tossed, and the amount of money that is spent on trying to put information in people's hands, you really have to hit them hard. And sometimes, while nothing that we published, nothing that was published on any of our postcards was ever incorrect. It was never attack on our opponents. It was always simply what his intentions were going to be when elected. And that doesn't always, there isn't a lot of civility in politics now, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent or whatever. Although I'll say that the Labor Party probably has the most civility. The independents tend to have the most civility. But we've seen politics over the course of the last 20 years just really go downhill as far as like that civility part. But for a candidate to be civil, to have a candidate that isn't willing to just get in the mud and sling dirt at the other candidates, they don't really seem to tend to get the attention that the other ones do. Which means that when it comes time to voting, somebody votes based on the name they recognize and not necessarily the person that may align the most with their own political views.
I don't know. That's true.
But how? Okay, so as a historian, as a lawyer, as an author now, how do you have any opinions on how politicians can potentially be more civil, but also tend to find that niche that gets them in the public and be responded.
Wow. If I could come up with that, I think, part of the problem is the people that tend to be attracted to public office or running for public office is, it's a small sliver of, the population as a whole. And you have the voters aren't demanding it, right? It's the same way we see when we talk about the media. We'd like them to be straight down the middle, but if the viewers are, looking for red meat, they're going to keep getting red meat for ratings. And I think, with the politicians, if you don't attack your opponent, or at least, I've always looked at it like you don't attack, you just distinguish. Like, what's the difference? I'm going to tell you what I stand for and what he stands for. And the way I view that may be tainted, but it's not untrue. A friend of mine says, everything you say is true, but is it the truth? Well, that's not for me to decide. That's for the voter to decide. Unfortunately, I think when we put all that stuff out in literature or social media, it becomes very easy to start attacking the other person. And, until the voters actually start electing people that don't attack, I don't think we're going to have a change. Might be decades, or if ever.
I'm hoping that, because the pendulum, I always go back to the pendulum. The pendulum has swung so far away from what it feels like where it should be. I fear how far the pendulum swings back the other direction. Yeah, I think that ultimately, when it comes to the politicians being civil, but that sometimes there's the possibility that maybe things get missed. Like the debate that we're having right now on the government shutdown has been wrapped around this idea that Democrats want to have every illegal access to healthcare, and the Republicans don't want to do that because for me, having read the bill, it is a very straight line bill. It's basically just a continuing resolution, but because it's not actually being presented as an omnibus or a continuing resolution, they can't do it without 60 votes. And then for the Democrats to want to hold on to the subsidies that are being provided for the ACA and things like that. I know that my health insurance, my premium isn't going to go up, but people that have not a PPO or have maybe a high deductible, their premium is going to go up, even though they're employed. They have, so it's always just this back and forth, and both parties aren't telling the whole truth. And because for the people that they're trying to get stirred up, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans, they always tell it with a narrative that is designed to increase the aggression and make it sound like the other party's trying to work against everyone else, vice versa. It's just the environment I don't like. It's and that's what a lot of it comes down to. So, well, Dennis, I don't want to keep you too long. I sincerely appreciate you being on the show with us and reaching out, because it's been an absolutely interesting conversation. I enjoyed the book. I encourage everyone to go and buy it. You can go to authordennisbrennan.com where the book is available. You mentioned you have a second book. The book is called DC Swamp Strikes Back, Aaron Burr, Donald Trump, and Their Similar Battles. It was a fascinating read, and I definitely did enjoy it. I appreciate you sending it to me. I will purchase a book because I like having it in my hands. So,
well, I appreciate that.
When are you thinking you might have another book come out? You mentioned you've got it written.
I have it written. It still has to be, it has to go through all the parts of editing and proofreading. I have to, recheck the sources to make sure we're right on those. There's no mistake.
Yeah.
So, last time that took quite a long time. Probably took 3 or 4 months to get that done. But I have to work with, the people that help me on this, and hopefully, I'm being told don't do anything now before Christmas unless it's a holiday book, which it's not. I don't know if that's good advice or not. Having just joined this, to me, I'm going to read the book, and I'm going to read a book whether it's Christmas or not. I don't know, but the experts know better, so I defer.
Did you enjoy the process? Did you enjoy the writing? And then what was the part you enjoyed the most? Was it the writing?
Yes, I think the writing is the fun part. The tough part is when they, edit it and send it back and say, okay, what do you think? Well, what, I have to read it again? I don't, it's like you're back in school. It's like, aren't you supposed to be doing that? I read it once when I wrote it. I don't want to read it again. But you end up reading it several times. And then you want to change things. It's like, wait a minute, should I change anything? And that's the part I don't like. But the actual writing of it is, it's more fun, I guess, if that's the right way to put it, than you would think.
Yeah. I feel the same way about the show, because I will have people say, you said such and such on the show, and I'm like, I don't go back and listen. I don't. This is all just regurgitation, and then whatever goes out. So, well, Dennis, I appreciate you being on the show with us. If you'll hold on just a second for us as we wrap up the show, Zach, you got anything coming up? How's it going over at Grindhouse?
Grindhouse is good. Those guys are still doing their thing, and they're there Wednesday through Sunday till 7:30. So Wyatt and Jeremy, the owners of it,
Grindhouse Skate Shop over in Irmo. So we'll always put details in there about.
And he's
that.
Absolutely down for us to come do an episode. So
that sounds like fun. I'd enjoy that. All right. Well, just real quick again, SoulHAUS Sessions number 3 is coming up October 22nd at Koger Center. Check out details in the show notes. Visit there. You can get tickets at Eventbrite. If you use code AAN, it's 50% off that ticket. So make sure to do that. And we hope we will see you there. I'll go ahead and wrap it up. I appreciate everybody for being here. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. I will just say this. Links to all of our past episodes, podcast platforms, merchandise, and social media are available at our webpage, theallaboutnothing.com. And if you think our financial model of giving away free content and entertainment is silly and you're in the giving mood, why not become an official Nothinger and support the show? Members get early access to this episode as well as exclusive content. You can visit members.theallaboutnothing.com, or you can find a link on our webpage. You can also give us a one-time donation through the same link. If you'd like to be a part of the show, you can call, leave us a message, dial 803-672-0533, or email the show at theallaboutnothing.com, or you can join our Discord server. Links available on our webpage. Thank you for listening, everybody. You all stay safe, be kind, and
keep your hands to yourself.
The All About Nothing podcast is a product of Big Media and produced and engineered by me, Barrett Gruber. Thanks to Cake for our intro music, Sick of You. You can follow everything Cake the band at cakemusic.com. Thanks to Muff the producer for our outro music. You can follow Muff on Instagram at Muff the producer. You can follow me across social media by visiting Linktree/Barrett Gruber. And you can follow Zach King on Linktree/AAN Zach. Want to support the show? Visit our webpage, theallaboutnothing.com. And become a member. There are several tiers available that give you early access to episodes as well as exclusive content. To find links to our social media, podcast platforms, and merchandise to support the show, as well as past episodes, visit theallaboutnothing.com. If you'd like to be a part of the show, you can email the show at theallaboutnothing.com, or you can call our number and leave a message. Dial 803-672-0533. If the time between these episodes is more than you can handle, check out our sister shows. What the Pod Was That with Carrie, Zach, and myself. Welcome to Wonderland with Me. Politically Speaking with Erica, Kirsten, and Emily. And Black, White, and Blue in the South with Dr. Jamil Brooks and Bill Kimmler. Please subscribe and share this show. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe and punch that notification bell. Thank you for listening, and hear us next week.
Hey, y'all, it's Barrett from the All About Nothing podcast. Winter's coming, but that doesn't mean you've got to slow down.
Nope, because Everplay Sports and Social has their winter leagues open for registration right now.
That's right. Starting Sundays, you can get in on softball at T.S. Martin Park.
Mondays are packed. You've got pickleball at the Casey Pickleball Complex, softball again at T.S. Martin Park, indoor volleyball at the Tri-City Leisure Center, and turf soccer at the Recreation Athletics.
Tuesdays, that's when it really heats up. You can play Super Rec kickball at MS Avenue Park, sand volleyball at Pollywogs, indoor volleyball at Tri-City Leisure Center, and bowling at Lucky Strike in Casey.
Wednesdays are loaded too. Soccer at B Avenue Park and Bray Park Field, hardball, softball at TS Martin Park, dodgeball at Drew Wellness Center, and of course, kickball at M Avenue Park.
And wrapping up the week on Thursdays, you've got even more kickball at M Avenue Park and B Avenue Park.
So whether you're into kicking, spiking, bowling, or just hanging out, there's something for everyone.
Almost forgot. Special one-night events.
Monday, November 10th, mix and match turf soccer at Recreation.
Pick up basketball Monday, November 17th at Drew Wellness Center.
And mix and match indoor volleyball at Tri-City Leisure Center, Tuesday, November 18th.
Registration for Everplay's Winter Leagues is open now, but you have to sign up before November 16th.
Do not wait. Teams fill up fast.
Go to everplaysocial.com. That's everplaysocial.com to join a league, meet new people, and make this winter one to remember.
So, dodgeball or bowling?
I'm thinking both. Got to balance the cardio and the nachos. Everplay Sports and Social. Play more, hang out more, live more.
The preceding podcast is a product of Big Media, LLC, and is copyright 2025, all rights reserved.